mayor's office conducted an autopsy and found that Miss Lewis' cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the body. Detectives conducted an investigation and developed a suspect. Frederick D. Thomas, age 33, was developed as a suspect. The investigation later revealed that Mr. Thomas did in fact cause the injuries to Miss Lewis that resulted in her death. The investigation was turned over to the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office, and the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office sought the indictment from the grand jury that I previously mentioned. As I indicated, it is a 9-count indictment. Mr. Thomas has been in the custody of the Sheriff's Department on an unrelated matter since approximately September 11th. With that said, after the indictment, a $1 million bond was issued. The indictment has been served upon Mr. Thomas. He is facing, as I mentioned, a 9-count indictment for first-degree murder. Possible penalties are 20 to 60 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections, with a mandatory supervised release of 3 years. These are non-probationable offenses. Mr. Thomas is currently being held and will appear on Friday, September 28th in Courtroom B in the Winnebago County Justice Center. These charges are merely allegations, and the defendant is presumed innocent until or unless proven guilty in a court of law. The Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office and the Rockford Police Department certainly understand that domestic violence is a concern in our community. The statistics are well known. It results in a substantial amount of our police calls. It results in a substantial impact on the youth in our community, and it is a problem in our community that must be addressed. I want to take this opportunity to mention that the ongoing efforts by the Rockford Police Department and law enforcement agencies, the state's attorney's office, and other community partners working to improve the results and the way that we are going at taking care of domestic violence in our community is improving. The addition of the mayor's office on domestic violence and human trafficking has provided a substantial step forward, and the community's ongoing efforts right now to create a family justice center is something that says that the Rockford community, the Winnebago community, and the Northern Illinois region recognize that domestic violence is a problem, and a problem that we are going to move forward in addressing. A family justice center is a great step, but cases like this we want to see end forever. The tragic and brutal murder of Jennifer Lewis is a domestic violence case and cannot and will not be tolerated in our community. I'd like to pause there and ask Chief O'Shea if he would step up and offer a few words about the investigation and his thoughts as well. Chief?
So first, as always, I want to thank the detectives who handled the case and the officers that worked the case. When you work cases, especially brutal cases like this, it takes a toll on them and their mental health as well, so I can't thank them enough. To the state's attorney's point, domestic violence, we all know it's about 34% of our violent crime. This is the quintessential domestic violence crime. Someone lost her life. She's a victim of domestic violence. It's something we're working on with the community. We respond to domestic violence. It's the community, the whole community, that has to step up and take on not allowing domestic violence and educating our kids in the community that it's not going to be accepted. So this is the result of domestic violence, and it's the worst kind of result we can get. So enough is said on domestic violence as far as I can, with the state's attorney. I won't say it anymore, but we really need to move forward and reduce our violent crime, which a lot of it is DV. So thanks.
Thank you, Chief. Can't agree more with the Chief. The partners in our community in law enforcement, Rockford Police Department has been wonderful partners in the work that we do to curb violent crime in our community. Domestic violence is right at the top of the list, and every effort is being made. This case was solved through the hard work of the Rockford Police Department, but it's everybody's goal to end these type of outcomes, to create a community where we are able to take care of domestic violence at an early stage. That's why I mentioned the youth in our community who are impacted by domestic violence in their home. It permeates all parts of our community and is a problem that will and must be addressed. I'd like to take some questions at this time.
What relationship did Jennifer and Frederick have?
This is boyfriend-girlfriend type relationship, is how I think most people would commonly describe it. And they had an involvement that would be indicated that they had an ongoing relationship.
Were they living together?
You know, I can't tell you that they specifically were residing together. You know, in situations such as this, it's not unusual for people to, you know, cohabitate. I don't know that, you know, how deep you want to go into establishing what living together looks like, whether they own a home together, share a lease together, you know, or are they just choosing to share a residence together. I think it's fair to say that, you know, they were in some type of cohabitation relationship. You know, how sophisticated and formal that was, I don't think I could provide that information to you. But I think it's fair to say that they did cohabitate together at times.
What indicators led you to Frederick, aside from his relationship with?
I'm going to let the chief answer that, but you know, clearly when an investigation like this happens, first thing you do is look at people who are involved in people's lives. Chief?
I won't go too far into the investigation. Obviously, there's a trial to come. So, obviously, the investigators look for people who were last involved with or last saw an individual when they end up dead. And the detectives do their job and talk to witnesses and gather evidence. And in this particular case, I can't really expound much on that.
Courtney?
And you said cause of death was blunt force trauma. Was there a weapon used, or?
We're not alleging that a weapon was used. Blunt force trauma, you know, physically brought on by the defendant. If you take a look at the indictment, you'll see that certain counts of the 9-count indictment allege brutal and heinous behavior and brutal conduct with regards to what we are alleging Mr. Thomas did to Ms. Lewis that resulted in her death.
What's the bigger message you guys would like to send out to the community? Because this is a big issue happening in our community, and a lot of people, men and women who are in relationships like this, are scared to come out. So how can you guys reassure that they're safe coming to the authorities in the area?
This community is making domestic violence a priority. We understand the concerns. We are currently involved in bringing the best practices and models to bear on the problem. And one of our chief initiatives and goals is to make sure that those that are survivors or victims of domestic violence are supported, know that they can come to the system. And not only will the criminal justice system, but this community will support them so that they can successfully get to the other side of this. They can successfully get away from those who are the perpetrators of the violence in their lives. And that's the message that we want to send to the community. And we recognize that for many it's hard to receive, but we want to grow that confidence and trust in those in the community that are the victims of domestic violence. Chief?
I would echo what the state's attorney said. There is neighbors, friends, relatives that a lot of times either hear a domestic going next door in an apartment, they hear arguing and screaming, yelling, family members that know or that someone is a victim of domestic violence, and they don't want to get involved, and they don't call the police, and they don't tell us because they don't want to get involved. That's a big problem. our message would be very simple. If you know someone is in a volatile domestic relationship, please contact the police, contact remedies, contact somebody to get that person help before something along these lines happen. People know and knew ahead of time. In most cases, when we go to domestic violence, it's not the very first time. The first punch isn't the first time there was a domestic violent act. So we encourage everyone to please reach out to us as soon as possible in any situation where they think there might be domestic violence going on.